Welcome back, friends, to the latest installment of Cult Stuff and Chill. I think at this point, I'm just gonna speak for the both of us when I say we're just uploading when we feel like uploading at this point, and that's kind of what it's gonna be for the foreseeable future.
Well, we've been very busy ladies. I can't talk about my exploits right now. Things are in the works. Things are moving. But Devan
Yeah, I
can
started
talk
my
about
new job
hers.
this week. And in addition to that, I decided that I wanted a garden in my backyard. And so despite the fact that I am very firmly an indoor cat, did a lot of outdoor work this weekend by myself because my husband is not home. And typically I wouldn't post that on the internet, but by the time this goes live, he will be back home. So come at me, bros. But I did a little garden project to surprise him with when he got home, mostly for my own benefit, and also because we're very much going for forgiveness instead of permission in this case, which I find to be the key to doing anything in the home that I want to do is just do it. 9 times out of 10, he enjoys the result, and on that 1 time out of 10, he's just like, deals with
Not
it.
my favorite.
Yeah, it's fine.
Not my favorite, but I don't hate it.
Exactly.
Like Travis the Pumpkinhead, or did he say that was excellent?
He actually, I think, enjoyed... at first he was like, I don't get it. And I was like, but look at him. And I think eventually that creepy little pumpkin face grew on him. And he
Stare
did...
into his eyes.
Yeah. I think he enjoys Travis now. And actually... So... Okay, last year, in the summertime, is when Halloween decorations started coming out. So, in a month or two, you guys, we could potentially be doing Halloween decoration hauls for you. For me, anyway. I actually might even drive my little happy ass over to Kansas City, which is about a 2-hour drive for me, and hit up some of the shops out there to look for some Halloween decor. Very exciting.
I mean, my whole vibe is Halloween decor, so it's never out of pocket for me to be like, Skellies, love it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it's creepy and crawly and bony, spidery, love it. But yeah, Amy McWhorter, if you ever find anything like that pumpkin, I would love one as well.
Yeah, if you
Probably
find
never will, but...
another creepy pumpkin head like you sent me, Mom, let us know where and how much we need to send you in monetary dollars.
I'll pay her whatever, just for finder's fee. I don't give a shit. Your mom finds the best stuff.
She really does. I'm
really jealous.
The thrift store, antique store guru, whisperer, I don't know what you want to call it, but she's always finding really great stuff. She found this one dishware set that was worth 10 times more than what she paid for it, and the guy was like, yeah, I'll take 50 for it. And so she got the full set of dishware that's this beautiful antique,
red china.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's so pretty.
And maybe it's just because the thrift stores out where I live and the antique stores out here are just not it. But she has amazing luck.
Yeah. But if she is the thrift store antique store queen, I am the Facebook Marketplace queen, because I find antique furniture, $50. We'll take it. Mm-hmm. I found a beautiful it's something that sits on a buffet. It has a mirror and shelves on it, very antique, and I got it for $25. Mm-hmm. And it's mercury glass in the mirror, which dangerous, whatever. We'll just spray paint over it or something. I don't know. Over the back.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Seal it. Try to seal it. Put some of that, what is it? As seen on TV, where they, put it on the bottom of the boat on the screen and it floats.
God, what is it called?
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And it's he, slaps it on it's a meme. He, slaps it on the thing. But yeah, anyway. God. So, I'll just do that. That way I won't get mercury poisoning. Everything will be fine.
Flexi Seal, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, Flexi Seal. There you go. Speaking of memes, though.
Okay, so I tried to Google Flexi Seal, and then the first thing that comes up is Flexi Seal rectal tube.
Oh.
So
their
just
their
Flex
Google Ads team
Seal.
is working.
Someone else's garbage can is rolling down the street now. It's I need to make sure that's not mine, because... No, I put mine in the garage. It can't be mine. It's Kansas, guys. We've been under a wind advisory for the last couple of days. And prior to hitting record, I looked out of the window and I was like, I think that's my trash can just like running away out like through the neighborhood. So I had to run out there and grab it and put it in the garage. And yeah, it's fucking windy. Windy as shit out here.
It reminds me, honestly, of that SpongeBob episode where they're, like, doing the Krusty Krab pizza, which I think actually Funny Fridays, like, referenced in our last video as well. But they're like, it's a boulder. We rode those things for miles. And it's just...
Yeah, you're just sitting on the boulder and it just... Or that one scene where they're, like, carrying the pizza and they're, like, can't walk because the wind is getting them and all the sand is blowing in their face. And then the Krusty Krab pizza's just covered in sand.
That's also Kansas.
Yeah, Kansas, man.
But speaking of trash, you want to tell us about the excitement of this week of the Mormon scandal?
Oh, yes. Okay, so for those of you that are on TikTok, there is a side of TikTok that is like Utah moms read Mormon mothers. And so apparently there's a group of like 7 women and their husbands that are all like part of this weird Utah influencer circle. And they all post online and stuff, and apparently they are also all soft swingers with each other. So basically, I guess what they're constituting soft swinging is that they won't go like all the way with each other, and if they do something sexual with someone else's partner, that person's partner needs to be in the room. Well, one of the Utah moms did not follow that rule with another of the Utah mom's husbands, and they went off into a room on one of these soft swinging retreats that they must do. These 2 went off into a room by themselves and like broke Mormon mom talk soft swinging code.
Well, and aren't they like all in the same room anyway? Like it's just a big party and they get shit face wasted. And
yeah,
they're just like all banging each other.
Yeah, and apparently like it was a frequent thing. Like they would go on camping trips over to each other's houses. They would have these large swinging events. And so the girl that went into the room with the lady's husband, she posted a TikTok live where she just exposed them all. She's like, look, we're soft swingers. This is what happened. I cheated on my husband with this woman's spouse. Now I'm getting a divorce. Well, then one of the other Utah moms goes on TikTok live, is like, she's making it up. It's all a lie. Anyway, it wasn't a lie. They were soft swingers. And now 3 of the couples in this group, again, I think there were 7 couples total, 3 of them are now getting divorced because of the fallout. We don't know exactly why the 3rd couple is getting divorced. Obviously, the first 2 couples is because of the cheating. And then there's a 3rd couple involved. So I don't know if somehow they were involved too. The story is still coming out. But apparently...
The story is still developing.
It is still developing. And it is just exactly the kind of stupid internet drama that I need, is these TikTok Utah Mormons. Which also, I just need to point out that all of these women they're Mormon. You can very clearly, based off the clothing that they're wearing, tell that they don't take their religion very seriously, because there's no way they're wearing the sacred panties and garmies.
Yeah, they are not wearing makeup in a God-honoring way. Like,
no, like... You can't wear the sacred underwear and short shorts and crop tops. And, like, that's fine that you don't want to, like... I'm not saying that you have to wear the sacred panties, but...
The garments.
If you're gonna be out here, you know, God bless the Mormons, like, espousing your religion, girls, you gotta actually, like, follow the rules here.
Right. But they also might be, like...
I feel like another irony of this is that they, like, push... them to get married so young, that I think because they're like so inexperienced and like have not done or seen much in their life, that apparently in Utah swinging is very common. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because of all these like young married people are like, I never have had experiences with anyone but my spouse, and so that they do the swinging thing, which is wild to me.
They do all sorts of weird stuff. But there's also, like, 2 branches of Mormons, I think. So they might be, like, the less strict branch of Mormons that are, like, more of a vibe. But I don't know. Because there's, like, I was watching, actually, it was a Funny Fridays video about this.
Oh.
But she just did one on, or maybe she didn't just do one on Mormons and she did it a while ago. I don't know. But she's talking about Mormons and how there's, like, a cooler sect. And they, like, built their stuff right next to the, like, Holy Land.
Yeah.
What they say, like, is the Garden of Eden, which...
Fucking Utah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But they, just to be petty, they just, like, built their, like, main center right next to it, just to be like, you want to hear the real thing about the Mormon religion? Mm-hmm.
So maybe they're the cool brand of Mormons and not, like, the garment-wearing Mormons.
Which also, it's, like, the Mormon thing about caffeine, the other thing about Utah is they have all these, like, soda shops rather than, like, coffee shops. But it's, like... Babes, you're not getting caffeine free. Like, soda still has caffeine in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the Mormon rules I don't quite understand. And also the thought of putting milk in a Diet Coke and then, like, drinking it as if it's a coffee makes me want to vomit.
Well, and it curdles. Like...
Yeah.
It curdles, it loses, it's fizzy. Like, I can see a root beer because that has, like, less
that might be good.
But, like, a root beer float, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Or, like, a cream soda, something like that.
Yeah. But, like, in a Coke? Ugh. No.
Yeah, apparently one of, like... The only reason I know this... I don't know how I got so deep into Utah TikTok, but there's this one girl that works at a soda shop, and she's like, like, the most popular drink is a Diet Coke with a splash of lime juice and then cream, and, like, that's basically... Like, just put rum in it. That's what you're supposed to do with that, is just put rum in it.
Well, and it's also, like, babes... You're getting a Diet Coke, but you're putting just, like, straight fat into it. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe it's a low-fat creamer or something. I don't know, but...
Just get the regular Coke at that point.
Well, and also just get a coffee. Like...
Yeah.
just get a coffee. No, I mean, I love a soda, and I love a soda shop as much as the next person, but I just don't get, like, they're like, we can't do this, so we're just gonna do everything but that.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like soaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh, which, if you guys don't know what soaking is, Google it. It's a trip.
Or don't. Maybe you don't want to.
No.
Maybe that's not the vibe today.
No. Mormons do be out here doing the most and also the least at the same time.
Not as bad as the like fundy, like Baptist fundies, like the Duggar fundies.
Ooh, yeah, Josh Duggar got sentenced this week.
Not enough.
No. I mean, he got like 12 years. I think the max was 20, so thankfully all of his kids will be grown, I think, for the most part. No, he'll have some that are still, like, in the home, but I don't know. He's icky. He gives me the big ick. So does Jim Bob and Michelle.
I thought he had multiple charges, so it was like 20 per charge. So, like, the max he could have been in there is for, like, 60 years.
Oh, yeah, that could be right. All I know is that he got 120 months.
Alright, do we want to get into it so we can...
Yeah, let's start the stories.
Get our lunch. Get our snackies.
Snackies.
Snacky snacks. Okay, so my story today is guided by the fact that I was just like, what's something that I have been interested in my entire life, pretty much, since I could read. And I took out a book from the library that was like, famous hauntings. I was like, this is great reading material for a 6-year-old. Anyway, so one of the premier stories in that book was about the Borley Rectory, and it was described as the most haunted house in England, and that has just had a grip hold on my psyche ever since I read that book at like 6 years old, because we'll just say it, I was a weird kid. I was like, yeah, I want these books on murders and like strange things from the library. That's what I want to take out. But I remember seeing the photos of the ghosts in the rectory, and I was like, who is she? I need to know more about her. So I was like, we'll talk about that today. So, the Borley Rectory was constructed on Hall Road near the Borley Church by Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull in 1862. The Gothic-style red brick house was built to replace an earlier rectory that had been destroyed in a fire about 20 years prior. It eventually included, like, an addition of a whole wing to the house that the 14 children of the Bull family to fill out with the 14 children of the Bull family, along with all the modern conveniences of the time, which were basically just like servants' bells and secret passages so the servants could pass through and not be seen by the members of the family. The Borley Church actually is pretty old, parts of which date back to the 12th century. I think the nave is from the 12th century, they think. And the whole Borley area, it kind of serves as a rural community seat for the 3 surrounding hamlets, so it's like basically like the biggest shit pile in the middle of all the other shit piles, which, sorry if you're from that area, I'm sure it's lovely. It's probably nicer than any of our shit piles. But I'm just picturing it like, not necessarily where I live, because I live near a larger city, but like where you came from, and like, you know, Alito's a lovely town. Oh wait, no, we'll cut that out.
That's okay. You can leave it in. I don't live there anymore.
The place where your family lives, though.
The rhubarb capital of the world.
Is a lovely place, but, yeah. It's just, it's the biggest nearby town.
Speaking of, so, apparently, to rent a house in that town, $1,200.
That's unheard of, but isn't there, like, a guy that, like, won the lottery and, like, moved back there and was like, I'm going to develop all this stuff and try to make it a really nice place, but it's just like, sir...
Mm-hmm. He has purchased some buildings in the downtown area, which, the downtown area, it's not much of a downtown. There's 2 bars and a Mexican restaurant, in a very small town with really nothing else, a Walmart, a McDonald's, that's it.
Right.
And he's purchased these buildings, and he's, like, developing the upstairs portions of these buildings into luxury apartments that he's wanting, like, $1,500 a month to rent
manage
out.
your expectations.
The only employers in this town are, like, blue-collar manufacturing and Walmart. And you think someone's going to be able to afford to pay $1,500 a month to live there? You think anyone's going to want to pay $1,500 a month to live there when you could pay that in the nearby city, commute 40 minutes into work?
Right.
I don't know. It's stupid. I digress. Back to the rectory.
Yeah. But this is what they were doing. They built this really nice, expensive house in not a great part of town. So, well, it's not that it wasn't a great part of town, it was just there was nothing around. Mm-hmm. So that might make a little bit of sense later as well. So there is a rumor that actually on the grounds of the rectory, there was originally a Benedictine monastery that was haunted. The story of the haunting goes that a monk from the monastery had a forbidden affair with a nun from a nearby convent, and when they discovered the affair, the monk lost his head and the nun was bricked up alive in the convent walls. However, the rumor has been disproven, mainly because, like, they didn't do that. They're just like, go out and, you know, go out and live your lives if you're gonna be fucking. That, coupled with the fact that, like, they don't think that there's actually a monastery on the grounds at all. Like, they don't have any evidence for that. And is widely speculated to have been started by the Bull children in an attempt to romanticize the rectory or, like, explain some of what they were seeing or experiencing.
Wait, so for those uncultured and ungodly heathens, can you explain what a rectory is? Because it took me until just now to put together what it was.
So a rectory is, like, where a priest lives or a reverend lives. It's usually paid for by the church on the church property. So what you'll see a lot is you'll see, like, you know, the cathedral, the church, whatever, and then there is a large house next to it. Or it could be small, it doesn't really matter. But it's just a house that is paid for by the parish so that the reverend can live there. And then they basically get, like, board to stay there. And I think it has to do somewhat with, like, taxes in certain areas. Like, you don't have to pay taxes if it's part of the church property. Whereas, like, if you had a separate house, then you'd have to pay taxes on it or something. Also, like, they get a stipend while they're living there, so they can buy other stuff, what they need. But usually it's not a whole lot. Mm-hmm. Well, for some places it's not. But, like, a lot of the churches are moving more towards, like, your stipend is fairly low, like, lower than buying luxury items. You know, like, you see the priests that are just buying, like, Gucci, and you're like,
that
how are we
pisses
affording
me
this?
off. Like, when I see this is, like, especially on the East Coast, I would see this a lot, where there would be, like, a pastor of a church that's, like, rolling around in a fucking Rolls Royce with, like, luxury items.
In the
like,
South, too.
There is no reason. That money that you are profiting off of the church, think about how much good you could be doing, and instead you're buying yourself. Like, that to me does not scream like I am a man of God, whatever you want to call that. It just is, like, selfishness.
See,
and,
we
like,
have some
self-aggrandizing.
cousins. Yeah, like, we have some cousins that are apostolics, and, like, all of their parishioners live in trailers, and they live in a mansion with, like, stained glass and a swimming pool. And they're apostolics, so that they, like, buy the expensive modesty swimsuits, and it's just like, boy.
Have you ever watched The Righteous Gemstones?
Mm-mm.
Oh my god. Highly recommend, if you ever get your hands on an HBO Max account, watch The Righteous Gemstones. It is hysterical. It's about a family like that, like, they run a mega church and they just, like, live this ridiculous lifestyle. But 10 out of 10, watch it. It's hilarious to me.
No, I had to get HBO Max so I could watch The Gay Pirate Show.
Okay, yeah, and I did love The Gay Pirate Show and The Gilded Age. Danny McBride, however, is in Righteous Gemstones, and he cracks me up, so... That's the next on your list. Definitely watch it. It's really, really good.
I will. Also, well, I'm going to wait to watch The Gilded Age as a little treat. But yeah, I'm going to have to get caught up on that. So, anyway, they moved into this rectory. The family moved into this rectory. And the first paranormal events to occur inside the house were unexplained footsteps, which were heard by the locals and sort of maids, servants, whatever, people just coming in, your average folk coming in around 1863, about a year after the construction was finished on the house. Nothing too exciting with 14 kids. It very well could have just been one of them running around, like, in the secret passages, but things got weirder when 4 of the Bull daughters claimed that while they were playing outside around twilight, then a nun appeared out of nowhere. They approached her and were like, hey, what's going on? Do you need any help? Why are you all the way out here in the middle of nowhere? What are you doing? But they said as they got closer, she actually disappeared into thin air. Now, despite being God-fearing church folk, they were still what I'm imagining as the UK equivalent of hillbillies. So they were, like, talking about it to everybody. They were talking about it to the organist, the butcher, the baker, whatever. And so they brought in people to kind of observe this behavior. In addition to the nun and the noisy footsteps ghost, it was also later claimed that there was a phantom coach that would just drive around, and it was actually being driven by 2 headless horsemen. It would just, like, skirt around everywhere, like, skirt. Just, skirt. Yeah. And there was also a pianist ghost that would just play the piano.
How
so
lovely.
The Bulls lived at the... Yeah. Just like... So the Bulls lived at the house, and they just suffered through the mild haunting for the next 4 decades, and the people of the town came in and witnessed a lot of the phenomenon. And over the 4 decades, the original Reverend Bull passed away, and one of his male children, Henry, who's also known as Harry for some reason, eventually took up his father's mantle as the Reverend of the parish until June 9th, 1927, when Harry actually passed away, ending the Bull family's residence there. The following year, the parish, they found a replacement in Reverend Guy Eric Smith. Guy and his wife moved into the house, and they just started cleaning up. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but, like, when you move into an old house, you tend to find a lot of random just garbage and shit laying around. So, like, when we moved in here, we found, like, just random glass and shit buried in the yard, and, like, garbage left in the walls or in the attic, because, like, when they were building the houses, a lot of these houses don't have insulation. It's like an air insulation system, so they just leave shit around. Whatever. So anyways, the good lady, Smith, she's cleaning out the cupboards, and she's, like, finding a bunch of shit, and she finds this brown paper package. And, you know, she's like, this is kind of hefty. You know, maybe this is something nice, or maybe this is, like, my husband put this here as, like, a late anniversary present. So she's, like, got her greedy little mitts on it. She's opening up, and instead of something lovely and nice, she finds a young woman's skull. And she's just like, all right, okay, cool. You have to remember this is England, so it's not totally out of pocket to find just, like, body parts laying around, especially, I think, in a rectory, because another thing about churches is a lot of times they'll have, like, saints' bones in the altar, especially Catholic churches, but sometimes other churches do as well. They just have, like, saints' bones and artifacts and relics just laying around, because, like, to be a church, you have to have saint relics. So
Yeah.
she was like, this could be a murder, this could just be, like, a saint's head, I don't know. We'll put this to the side. I don't have time for this right now. I'm cleaning this house. Shortly after this time, the Smith family actually started to report a variety of unexplained paranormal phenomena, including the servants' bells ringing despite being totally disconnected, lights appearing in the windows, and unexplained footsteps. It wasn't until the good Lady Smith saw the headless horseman carriage skirt up that she was like, we are way out of our depth here. And so she called the Daily Mirror begging for help. So the Smith family thought that the newspaper would be able to get them in touch with the Society for Psychical Research, Psychical Research, which I'm going to refer to as the SPR because I obviously cannot say that and it's a mouthful. Anyways, the SPR, which we are a little bit familiar with since our old pal Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a member at the time, and I think we talked about it earlier, but they would basically go around and vet out these paranormal events and try to either discredit them or prove them and be like, yes, this is in fact ghosts, or no, this is just some guy with a candle in the window. But basically the arrangement that it seems like the paper and the SPR had was that the paper would send people out to vet it before the SPR, like, spent time investigating it. They also kind of were, like, Kris Kardashianing it so that they could, like, build up some hype about it in the papers so that people were buying the papers and be like, oh, like, this ghost thing is going on. Like, we're going to be sending the SPR out. Like, we're going to be sending them out to investigate. But, like, they would send lesser investigators out first to kind of see, you know, like, what they could find and what sort of phenomena was going on and if they could discredit it before sending out, like, the big guns. But also it was, like, mutually beneficial because they were selling a lot of papers and then the SPR was getting a lot of, like, publicity about this. And then the owners of the house, too. So, like, it was really beneficial for everyone in the situation. So on June 10th, 1929, the newspaper sent out a reporter, and Harry Price, a respected but skeptical paranormal researcher, sort of like, what is it? TAPS. What's that one?
Oh. I can't.
All I can think of is Ghost Adventures, but that's
Ghost
Zach
Hunters?
Bagans. Yeah, Ghost Hunters.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like them. Like, they're going out and he was going out most of the time trying to see, like, what he could disprove first. Like, oh, it's just, you know, the floor is unlevel, so that's why the ball is rolling down the floor. But anyways, so he went out to make his first visit to the house. Harry Price arrived on June 12th, and immediately he was, like, getting hit by rocks, vases, buttons, bottles, and other random shit, just, like, being thrown by unseen hands, seemingly coming from nowhere. He was also hearing spirit messages that were tapped on the frame of a mirror, and he was just like, all right, I got proof this place is haunted as fuck, and he just dipped out. However, the good Lady Smith was like, none of that happened before or after you left. Like, I think things were, like, getting thrown, but they weren't, like, getting pelted at people's heads. And she was like, I think you're full of shit. And we still have ghosts. Like, you didn't do anything about this. Also, like, if you're familiar with one of our previous episodes where Devan talked about the spiritualist movement, Harry Price was actually friends and colleagues with other famed paranormal skeptics such as Harry Houdini. So this was kind of like an out-of-pocket accusation, her being like, I think you faked this. Didn't really match his vibe. But it's also totally plausible that he did create all of this himself, because he would go on to write a wildly popular book about it called The Most Haunted House in England, and it was claimed to be sort of the holy grail of paranormal evidence for the next decade or so. So it kind of seems like maybe he just wanted to make a lot of money off of this. It could go either way. Another hypothesis in the situation is that the SPR actually had sent someone to fake the phenomena so Harry would think it was real, because they were running out of steam and they needed some publicity. But, like, the SPR was pretty skeptical when it came to this kind of thing. Like, they were really trying to make sure that it wasn't any sort of naturally occurring phenomena or, like, faked paranormal stuff before they acknowledged that it was real. And as a matter of fact, that's why Sir Arthur Conan Doyle ended up quitting, because they were debunking too much, and he's just like, you're not letting me have any fun here. So despite most of the hauntings being casual for the Smiths, remember, this was something the Bulls lived with for like 40 years. The Smiths decided that the Ghost Adventures life, it was not for them. They were not cut out to be ghost hunters. So just about a year after they moved in, they actually left and transferred to a different rectory. After their newfound fame, the parish, they had a little bit of an issue sourcing a replacement, because everyone's like, we don't want to live in a haunted rectory. Not for us. Until eventually they found a replacement in one of the cousins of the Bull family, Reverend Lionel Algernon Foister, and his wife Marianne, and their adopted daughter Adelaide. So, I don't know what about this family makes people want to be priests, but whatever. The Foisters immediately experienced weird phenomena, such as phantom bell ringing, as reported before, windows shattering, stones and bottles being pelted at them, wall writing, where, like, something would appear on the wall like it was being written in water or something, and it would just, like, stay there for a while. They also experienced Adelaide, the adopted daughter, being locked in a room that didn't have a key, or I think it had a lock, but, like, they didn't know where the key was, and it wasn't like she had just locked herself in there. And also being attacked by, quote, something horrible. They never really elaborated on that. They were just like, she got attacked. Marianne, the wife, claims that she received a slew of poltergeist activity, including being violently thrown from the bed. Ooh. Twice, Lionel tried to conduct exorcisms, but, like, to no avail. In the middle of the first exorcism, he was actually, like, hit by a softball-sized stone that just totally derailed it. The Daily Mirror and SPR's plan seemingly was, like, working. Like, they were getting traction. They were reporting on this. They were like, look at this. They failed exorcisms. Many ghosts. Haunting is just increasing. So this story caught the interest of many paranormal researchers, who all agreed that the phenomena was either consciously or subconsciously being caused by Marianne. Marianne had claimed that it was her husband and one of the other paranormal researchers that was actually causing the phenomena, not her. And that some of the phenomena was, like, definitely just a casual haunting, not, like, a poltergeist associated with a person. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little fucky and kind of like the Mormon, like, soft-swinging cheating scandal we talked about earlier. Like, I have suspicions that all these people were just, like, hanging out in this huge house and they were just, like, fucking each other.
Oh, God.
Because... Yeah. Like, I have, a theory that Lionel was, like, gay, and he's just like, oh, look at all these nice man paranormal investigators. My only evidence for this is that they had an adopted daughter and no other children. But, I mean, like, they could have been infertile, but I'm just like, that boy's gay. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that. This theory
does have... Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
But
I truly believe that. Yeah. And honestly, like, get your freak on, guys. If you want to have, like, ghosty, haunted house, sexy times, whatever. But this theory actually...
I follow a girl on TikTok who, like, is in a very intimate, personal, and
Rebecca the Ghost Guide.
Yes! Rebecca the Ghost Guide has a ghost
with
boyfriend.
A ghost.
Also has
and a real boyfriend.
Mortal husband. And she, like, posts these reenactions of, like, the conversation she has with her ghost boyfriend, and also, like, apparently they do have, they are intimate.
So maybe it was, like, the paranormal investigators and the family and everybody and the ghosts were all, you know.
Fucking.
But this theory, this is not just speculation. This actually has some traction. So the swinging, the soft swinging. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Marianne actually admitted to having a spicy affair with a lodger, Frank Peerless, and that she had used some of the paranormal, like, later after all this happened, she's like, yeah, I did say that some of this stuff was paranormal just because she wanted to cover up her liaisons.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's a deeper layer of truth to this that everybody was, you know.
Boinking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But anyways, after a little while, they actually left due to Lionel's poor health, around, I think, 1935. And Borley Rectory, it sat vacant until Harry Price decided to finish what he started. He's like, I have to know more about her, and he wanted to go investigate more. So Harry took out a year-long rental agreement with the owners of the property, and he went out, recruited 48 official observers, quote-unquote, to collect evidence of any paranormal phenomena that occurred. And these were mostly, like, students and just, like, people that were younger and didn't have much going for them that summer. It's at this point that Harry sort of lost any and all plausible deniability he had, because he started to kind of play into the narrative that this was a haunted house by faking a lot of shit. So he was out here, he was having seances, he was conducting these scenes, and he was like, one of these spirits is a French nun known as Marie Laure. According to the Ouija board, because they're using a Ouija board to figure all this out, which, of course, long time to be on a Ouija board, you know? But according to the Ouija board, Marie Laure was a nun who traveled to England to marry a member of the Waldegrave family, the ancestral owners of the nearby 17th century manor house in the area. She had been murdered, and her body had been thrown into a disused well or buried in a cellar somewhere nearby. And it was claimed that the wall writings from when the Foyster family resided there are said to be Marie begging for help, as one of them said, "Marianne, please help get me out." The second spirit that he allegedly made contact with was identified as Sune Amores, and he claimed that he would set fire to the rectory that very same night, which was March 27th in 1938. He said that at the times that the rectory burned down, the bones of a murdered person would be revealed. Well, the fire didn't occur that night, but the rectory did catch fire. So about a year later, after Price, he had collected all the evidence he needed to write his book. The rectory had actually been sold off to Captain W.H. Gregson. While Cappy was in there unpacking boxes, he accidentally knocked over an oil lamp that was in the hallway. Despite having the modern conveniences of 1862, it had never actually been hooked up to gas or electricity. So the house, he was using this oil lamp to see, and there's oil lamps everywhere. But the house, quickly burned to the ground, because you have to imagine, there's a lot of stuff that's highly flammable.
Oh, yeah.
It's also important to note that the insurance company determined that the blaze was started intentionally. They were like, this shit was burned on purpose. So that's a little suspicious. Also, for something is that famous and that guy to have moved in, it's a little hard for me to believe that it just, accidentally caught on fire.
Right, yeah, it is a little suspicious.
A little sus. So, while the rectory was burning down, a witness from the nearby Borley Lodge actually claimed to have seen the figure of a ghostly nun in the upstairs window, but she would not give the full details until she had been paid her 1 guinea for her story. So the rectory, it just burned down, and they didn't really do anything about it. The outside walls, they were all, the bricks, so they were still standing, but obviously, the inside woodwork, everything was burned. So it's just, the shell of a building. About 4 years after it did burn down, Harry Price got permission to dig in the basement, and he spent a few minutes just shuffling around with his little trowel, and he allegedly found 2 bones that appeared to be from a young woman. And he was like, yep, these are the bones that we were talking about. But the bones, they're kind of an object of controversy in themselves, because the Borley church would not even inter them in their yard. They had to be taken to the nearby Liston churchyard, because it was widely believed by pretty much everyone that they were just pig bones, and Harry Price had taken them in there and been like, ah, yes, the bones that we were talking about, I found them. Harry Price, he published his book. He made a bunch of money. Holy Grail of Paranormal Evidence. He was pretty happy with his situation. He was calling the Borley Rectory the most haunted place in the UK, getting a bunch of interviews, whatever. But here's where things really go south for Harry, which is not until after his death in 1948. But the Daily Mail reporter Charles Sutton, he came out and he had claimed that while he had been investigating the rectory with Harry, he was hit in the head by a large pebble. And Charles was like, he grabbed Harry and he's like,
constitutes a large pebble? Because to
smaller
me,
than a softball.
A pebble would be like a tiny little rock. Whereas, you know, something larger than a tiny little rock, aka this to me, would be a large pebble.
Probably something about that big, yeah.
Okay, well, for...
So about the size of a quarter.
Visual reference, you guys. This...
Okay, so Charles, he just got decked in the head by a rock, and he grabbed Harry, and he's like, what the fuck, man? So he, like, checked his pockets. He just, like, frisked him real quick, and he discovered that Harry's pockets were chock full of rocks. And he was like, dude, you just hit me in the head with a rock, you prick. But he, like, didn't talk about it because he was just like, I don't feel like messing with this right now. Like, he has too much credibility. So in an effort to control the damage, like, this case had a lot of publicity, and the SPR had never actually gone out and investigated it, but they were like, we should probably go look and, you know, like, either we need to make a comment on this or else we're going to look like idiots.
Yeah.
So they decided to do their own independent investigation into the evidence made by Harry Price. And they discovered that most of the phenomena had actually just been fraudulently produced or naturally occurring phenomena due to the weird architecture of the house and, like, all the secret passages and stuff. There's also just, like, random holes in the wall everywhere. Despite some paranormal research people backing up Harry, those people didn't really have any evidence to back up their claims, so the common opinion was that he had just faked everything. And the real blow to Harry's credibility came when one lad named Louis Meyerling revealed that he, in fact, had been responsible for most of the hauntings over the lifespan of the house. So, Louis claimed that he arrived in Borley in 1918 when the Bulls lived there as a child at 6 years old, and that he was hired by the bored and eccentric Reverend Bull to pluck the strings on the piano through the hole in the wall to spook guests, amongst other things, like just walk around, run around, whatever. And that the whole Borley Rectory, like, haunting situation was simply, like, a haunted house sort of thing. Like, they were just delighting and spooking people. It was, like, a form of entertainment. That's why nothing was really that serious. He was just, like, it was just for fun. Like, we were just doing it because we were bored, and obviously it's in the middle of bumfuck nowhere when we have not even, like, gas running through this house, so... Lewis claims that the family members and the servants were encouraged by the Reverend Bull to tell tales of what they had seen, so, like, the coach story was likely never a thing. And they encouraged to exploit the many hidden doors and passages to create the paranormal phenomena, not just, like, Lewis, who was, like, actively... That's really all he did at the time, but, like, the servants were encouraged, like, if you're just walking through, like, tap, tap, tap on the wall and scare people. The Lady Bull, the Reverend's wife, had actually claimed to have never seen any actual paranormal activity. And, like, the children were like, no, we did see some, but most of it was just made up. And Lewis claimed that while the Smiths were there, he wasn't there, but when the Foysters took over Borley, they retained Lewis as the resident house ghost, which is something that Lionel Foyster even admitted to, that, you know, like, he's getting paid £6 a week to live there. He's like, we need to ramp up the money here. I got a wife and an adopted kid and my other exploits I have going on. So he hired Lewis to come in and create all this fake phenomena and try to get the news in on it so that people would come and pay to stay there, you know, like, give them money basically as, I don't know, to keep the house going. So he's like, we got to get this dough, get that bank. Marianne also later admitted to playing pranks on her husband, and additionally to the paranormal activity stuff to, like, cover up the affair. She was like, yeah, we were just, like, fucking around. Like, literally both. She's like, it was fun, whatever. The Foysters even went so far as to install a new water heater, which emitted a heavy knocking sound whenever it turned on. And they were like, oh my god, it's so scary. What is that knocking? They also dusted the baseboards with a phosphorus powder that catches fire when exposed to the air. So they would like kind of pack it in the holes and stuff, and then like they would kind of brush by it, and it would be exposed to the air, and it would just,
that seems like really unnecessarily dangerous.
Yeah, it was. Which probably didn't help the fact that it, like, burned down so much, like, so quickly.
It was probably still, like, packed full of fucking phosphorus powder. Jeez Louise.
Right, well, and I think it was, like, they were doing it in, like, the stone parts of it, so it wasn't, like, that bad, but, they also discovered that, like, the house had been constructed with a type of stone that, like, if you, like, write on it, like, it retains moisture really well, so that's where, like, the ghost writing came from. So Lewis would have to go around and, like, write shit on the walls, and then it would just, like, be there for a while, so, like, long enough that someone would just encounter it and, like, not catch him. Lewis also would walk around the gardens at dusk in a black cape with, like, a high collar. And, like, they're like, oh, it's the headless monk who got his head chopped off. And he's writing
would be
cryptic...
very fun to do that.
Yeah. That would be kind of fun. But they're like, oh, yeah, he got his head chopped off. Ooh. And that, yeah, it was just... like, the theater of it. Like, the pageantry. Like,
he just, like, really wanted to be an actor, but this is, like, as close as he was able to ever get.
Well, and it's like, I mean, they are bored, but, like, at this point, we're getting into the, like, late 30s. Or, like, the 30s, which, you think about the 30s, like, they had movies. Like, they had electricity. What's going on here? Lewis does say that there was one weird incident that he was never able to explain and was actually pretty, like, scary and dangerous. According to Lewis, on Easter of 1935, the Foysters had a group of friends over for a seance. They chose an underground cellar. They were just sitting in silence waiting for something to happen. Someone coughed and was about to speak in the group when the kitchen bells clanged together in a single clash, which was impossible for them to do. Like, they were too far apart. They shouldn't have been able to, like, touch each other. Also, the house was empty, so it's not like someone should have been able, like, no one was there to do it. All the people that would have been creating the phenomena were in the basement. And that, like, startled one of the men, and he jumped up, and there was a lightning strike of a silver blue light, which appeared to implode from all of the surfaces of the cellar, like, into the group. After the implosion of this, like, flash of light, every member of the seance was struck by, like, an instant paralysis that lasted for about 5 seconds, and they just couldn't move. After this event, Lewis was actually blinded in both his eyes, but he eventually regained sight in one of his eyes. But he remained shaken by those events until later in life. He's like, there was nothing that we were doing there that should have caused this. But it's like, they might have just been testing out something, and then it went tits up, and they're like, oh, let's never do that again.
I love that phrase. It went tits up.
Literally went tits up. So yeah, the story of the Borley Rectory basically is that they were just fucking around. Everybody was fucking around. The children of the Bull family, some of them did admit to creating some of the phenomena, but some of them did claim to have experienced the paranormal phenomena. And like I said, with the Smith family, like, Lewis wasn't there while the Smith family was there, so it was a little weird that they were also experiencing, like, some of the very similar phenomena, because at that point it wasn't like, I mean, it was pretty well known that there was paranormal stuff going on, but they were also like, why is it happening to us? Like, we're just here to be church people. The other thing is that, like, the servants might have still been, like, perpetuating some of this stuff, like, just, you know, like, knocking on the walls and throwing stuff to, like,
just for funsies.
Scare them. Right. The other thing that, like, I mean, we've kind of talked about it before, is that it might have been, like, sometimes in haunted places that maybe weren't originally haunted, as, like, people put so much energy into, like, I think this is haunted, that, like, I think personally sometimes, like, you can manifest stuff that's not a ghost or anything, but it's just, like, you know, shadow people or whatever. Like, I think that's what shadow people are, is, like, they're just a manifestation of people wanting to be scared by ghosts. So I think that also might have been a part of it. Like, it was wishful thinking. But, like, the SPR had determined a lot of it was just caused by, like, the natural acoustics of the weird architecture of the house. Yeah. Because, yeah, That was the thing. Like, they just did whatever they felt like. So, who's to really say if it was a real haunting or not? Not me. But it's burned down now. It's bungalows. But that's the story of the Borley Rectory.
Why do I feel like Arthur Conan Doyle was just like the olden time Zach Baggins?
I feel like he was.
Also, and I don't know what in the story sparked. I have ADHD brain where, like, you will say something completely random and then my brain will, like, go down a path and lead me to point B. And some point during that story, I just came up with a really fun birthday present for you. So that was a great choice because now I feel like I have a great idea for something to get you for your birthday. And it really, thinking back, absolutely nothing to do with anything you just told me. But like I said, you said one thing and then it just spiraled and then eventually it got to point B. It's like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm glad I did.
Is it another jar of dirt? Because I'd love another jar of dirt.
No, it's not another jar of dirt. I feel like I was bamboozled once and I will not fall for that trick again unless I am the one personally collecting dirt from a site that I know to be haunted. So I'm very excited for this, so I'm going to have to pick up a few things at Hobby Lobby today. Aside from the things that I was already picking up. And speaking of picking up, a little stinky girl just came in here and wants
What a baby,
attention.
let me see.
Let me bring the baby up to the camera. Hang on, I gotta take my earbuds out, but she's been sitting here like, I want attention. Come here, you chunk. Oh, baby.
Has she?
Oh, baby, look at the fatty.
Oh, look at that.
Kitten. Oh, she says hello. Everybody.
She says, let me
say hi to
down.
Noodle. She's a very important part of this cult family. And she's so cute. Say something into the mic. Give them a squeak. No? Okay. Well, that's fine. You don't have to have anything to say right now. Just know that I'm disappointed in you.
What a failure.
What a failure. You're so cute, though. She, like, at one point, I heard her hop off of her little tree, and then she walked in here and just sat here, stared at me, and flopped down. I was like, you just want attention, so. Anyway, that was a good story. I thoroughly enjoy a good haunting story.
Well, not real haunting story.
Well,
but it's also like, we have weird stuff happen at our house all the time, and I'm just like, how did they get so lucky that it was not actually a ghost?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, everything about that home would scream to me that, yes, it would indeed be haunted. And maybe it is, and maybe they were just, like, playing it up, but I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, because it's burned down now.
It done burnt to the ground, baby.
It went up like a Christmas tree on the 4th of July. I don't know.
Anyway, shall I get into my story here?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go.
So, fun fact about me is that in addition to moths and the dark, one of my greatest fears in life is interacting with children. Because I don't know what to do with them. And then, like, one of the scariest horror movie tropes to me is children. Creepy children. And so, like, this week I decided I either need to traumatize myself further or, like, get myself over the fear. So I chose to talk to you about the 11-year-old serial killer named Mary Bell. So we're going to set the scene. Mary, she was born on May 26th in 1957 in Newcastle, England. And fun fact, she's a Gemini, just like our dear friend Ashlee here. So maybe that explains things. But also, okay, so have you ever seen that chart where it gives, like, the zodiac signs listed for being, like, known serial killers?
Yeah, they're all Geminis.
While I was researching this, I actually looked it up to see what the percentage of serial killers to Gemini, what the pipeline was there. So, and actually, according to, it's a website called Astrology Zodiac Signs, they like went over 500 different serial killers to see what zodiac signs contained the most serial killers, and actually they found that Cancer, Pisces, and Sagittarius and Scorpio, those 4 accounted for almost 40% of all serial killers. And
but
then
I
Gemini
feel like,
and go ahead.
I feel like Gemini though is like the serial killers that are the worst are Gemini. Like
the serial killers that got away with it, I think. There's probably a lot more Geminis that we just don't know about. But, like, of known ones, there's only, like, 5.5% are Geminis. And Libras are actually ahead of Geminis as far as serial killer tendencies go. So I'm more statistically likely to murder you than Ashlee is. So don't catch me in a dark alley, bitch.
Maybe it is just, like, Gemini slander, but also, like, Dahmer was a Gemini. And you're thinking about, like, the scope. Like, he very nearly did not get caught. So...
Yeah, so that's maybe the caveat
it.
here, is that they were only studying statistics based off of serial killers that got caught. And there are plenty of serial killers out there that have never been caught, so maybe they are all Geminis.
I was actually talking about this the other day with someone where I was like, yeah, Geminis are, like, pretty well known for being, like, vicious serial killers. Mm-hmm. Like, vicious. Like, the normal serial killers, whatever, but...
Yeah, the ones that only got, like, 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Barely a serial killer, like... Mm-hmm. But anyways...
Yeah, anyway, so continuing... Yeah, there is a distinct pipeline between being a Gemini and murdering people. So just take that for what you will take that for. Anyways, that has nothing to do with our story. Just a fun little detour on our stop through hell. So Mary's mother... Her name was Betty Bell, and Betty was a sex worker. She started in the industry when she was only 17, or much younger than that. So she had Mary when she was 17. So she likely was trafficked, if I had to guess, but she was a sex worker. Allegedly, the first thing that Betty Bell said when Mary was born was, "Take this thing away from me." So... Let's just take a moment because, like, Betty, she was young. She was 17 when she gave birth, so there's, like, no way she actually wanted to be in that industry because she was still a freaking child. So, like, there's also definitely no way that she wanted to have a baby. So, I don't really blame her for this. I mean, I do blame her for everything else shitty that she does further on down the line. Anyways, so... Mary's father, they don't know who he was. He was one of the clients of Betty. So, that's fucked up. Despite Betty's reaction to giving birth being, "Take this thing away from me," she did keep Mary and raise her. And so when Mary was just 1 year old, her mom ends up marrying a man named Robert, who did step up into a fatherly role, but... he was an armed robber by trade. So, Mary's really just being set up for failure from a very early age here. And Mary, Betty, and Robert, they also happen to live in a small town called Scotswood, in a house that was often described as being in a state of constant filth. And another little fact about this town, they lived in Scotswood, at the time it was like a very low income town with a notoriously high rate of crime, violent crime in particular. More specifically, the neighborhood in which Mary lived was notorious for violent crimes, for domestic abuse, drug use, for being really high density of sex workers, and it was just not a good place to be. But despite all of this, the children on Mary's street were kind of allowed to run wild, and they would basically, like, from the age of literally 2-3 years old, be turned out into the street to go play with all their, like, little hooligan friends, and then they would be out there until, like, midnight when the parents were done being up to no good, basically. So, our story is going to get real fucked up for a second here, so I'm going to... anyone that is really sensitive to SA, CSA... I'm going to touch on it briefly because I could go into more details, but I just didn't feel like it was totally necessary. You'll get the picture here. But skip ahead a couple minutes in the story if that's something that really, like, triggers you. So, here's your warning. Brief pause. Okay, now we're going to get into it. So Mary's mom, Betty, she has a severe bipolar disorder. She was an alcoholic. She was likely abused herself growing up. And in addition to that, her specialty within her field of sex work, despite having violent tendencies already due to the bipolar disorder and alcoholism, she was an S&M worker. So this is, for anyone that's like interested in or looked into like the kink community, that's like a big no-no for like people that are practicing S&M safely, is like people that have a hard time regulating their emotions or staying sober. You do not, like, because you can take this down a really like actually abusive path. So
like people that are out of control, like there's a lot of like boundaries and stuff that have to be followed in that. And
if you're practicing S&M safely, you are a very in control person. You are sober while you're practicing it is like a big one, I know, a lot of the time. But anyways, so basically from the time Mary was 4 years old, her mother would offer her up to be abused by clients as part of her S&M routine. And they would even sometimes pay Betty to SA her own daughter while they watched. Mary, due to all this abuse likely, was also a chronic bedwetter, and she would oftentimes force herself to stay awake all through the night because if she was caught having wet the bed, her mom would rub her face in it and hang the mattress out for everyone to see and just like really make fun of her. Also, I should note that my voice is very shaky right now, and it's not because any reason other than I'm very freezing right now because the AC is blasting. And also, I inhaled a lot of pollen over the weekend, so I'm having a hard time, like, not sneezing.
A little wobbly.
So I'm a little wobbly. I'm sorry if I sound weird. Anyways, back into our story. So Betty also allegedly tried to murder Mary several times. And at one time or another, Mary's family would allege that she had accidentally swallowed a bunch of sleeping pills. And in one of these instances, because there were multiple, she had to be hospitalized, and Mary told the doctors that her mom had given her Smarties, that little, like, candy that's basically like the small pill-shaped sugar things. So there was yet another instance of Mary, quote-unquote, falling out of a second-story window. Yet another time, her mom choked her out. And then there's one time where Betty even tried to give her away. So, and this story's really fucking sad, because, like, what could have been of Mary's life? But basically, Betty, she walked Mary down to the adoption clinic to give her away, and, like, they were in the waiting room or something, and a woman came out crying because she was, like, deemed ineligible to adopt, basically. So Betty basically just goes, take this one, just, like, pushes her daughter to this woman, and she goes, I don't want her anyway, take her. So Mary ends up leaving with this woman who had come in to adopt a child, and Betty's sister, meanwhile, she knew that Betty was, like, up to something, like, up to no good, basically. And so she had followed the family, so Mary and Betty, to the clinic, and then she ends up following the woman that adopted Mary and Mary to this woman's house to see where she lived, and then sister goes back to Betty and is like, you better pick up your fucking child, or I'm gonna call the police on you. And so Mary, I wish so badly that sister had just butted out, because this woman, like, upon taking her from the adoption center, like, went and bought her a bunch of clothes and toys and, like, was feeding her a nice dinner when Mary's mom shows up and takes her daughter back. And this woman was just, like, I think probably a saint and would have been a great mother, and, like, was like, no, I bought these toys and these clothes for you, take them, you clearly need them. Like, this would have been a really great ending to the story if Betty's had just, like, fucked off permanently. But anyway, because of all this trauma, Mary had a really hard time connecting with other kids or really making friends. And so in her school life, Mary was known to be, like, inattentive and have violent outbursts, which, like, is common in kids that, you know, deal with traumatic abuse and things like that. And so because of this, a lot of the other kids were scared of her. And so she would just, like, spend a lot of time alone and being teased by the other kids. But she did manage to make a couple of friends. So the first one was a girl that was a couple years older than her. Her name was Norma. So Norma's going to play a role in this story. The second girl was her same age. I'm not going to list her name here because not really that necessary. And unfortunately, her life ended really early because she was struck by a bus and killed right in front of Mary as they were playing in the street.
Oh my God.
So it's just like trauma with a side serving of trauma in this poor girl's life. So now she has her one friend left, Norma. They were like attached at the hip despite Norma being a bit older. And it is something to note that Norma was labeled quote unquote simple. So back in the day, someone that would have like a learning disability or maybe, you know, autism or something like that, they might be labeled simple because they also had a hard time like connecting with other people, with reading social situations and learning disabilities, things like that. So basically Norma would do whatever Mary told her to do and would just follow her around like a little puppy dog. And this started to add up to trouble about the time that Mary was 10 and Norma was 12. So the first incident happens when the two girls, they took a young boy that was 3 years old from his home. They knocked on the door and they're like, we're going to go take little boy to go get some sweets. And so after about an hour, after having taken this boy from his home, the girls brought the boy to a local pub and he was just like bleeding profusely. And they said that he had fallen off a ledge. So this is like the first thing where people are like, that's a little weird, but you know, nothing had happened prior to that. So they're just like, okay, maybe he really did just fall down. And again, like I said, these kids ran around wild throughout the neighborhood during the day from the age of like 2 or 3. So it was really not like that strange.
And it seems like all the adults were pretty inattentive. So they're just like, whatever, who gives a fuck? Inattentive.
Like I said, there was like a lot of crime, there was a lot of drug use, there was a lot of sex work happening in this neighborhood, so it was kind of just like a free-for-all. The very next day, as the girls were walking past a sand pit, there was like some, like I think it was 4 or 5 7 or 8 year old girls. They were outside playing, and so Mary decided it was time for another violent outburst, and so she jumped these girls and was like punching them, beating them, choking them out. One of the girls ends up turning purple as Mary choked her out and ended up having like very severe bruising on her throat. And so the other girls, they did report the incident to the police. However, nothing was really done about it. And so because of that, Mary's like, I can get away with practically fucking anything. And so her behavior, unfortunately, only gets worse from here. So enter Mary's first murder victim. Of course, she's victimized other children in the neighborhood, probably many other times other than the 2 that we just have documented. But her first victim is 4-year-old Martin Brown. So on May 25th of 1968, little Martin Brown, he leaves his aunt's house at about 3 p.m. With some change, and he's going to go down to the local drugstore to get a lollipop, which I'm thinking about my niece, who is about 1.5 right now, just barely walking, and like, I don't even think she's got words yet. So imagining a 3-year-old walking down to a drugstore to buy, like, make a purchase by himself is incredible to me. But again, this is not out of the norm for this neighborhood. So he takes his little pocket change. He's going down to buy a lollipop from the drugstore, and he leaves the store with a little lollipop in hand about 3:15. And so, like, just to set the scene of this neighborhood a little bit further, the neighborhood, I think, at this point was kind of in the process of being leveled and sort of gentrified in certain areas. So there's a lot of abandoned buildings, a lot of, like, construction zones that are just left unattended. Like, there's just rubble and stuff everywhere. But in these abandoned houses, of course, the kids are running wild through the neighborhood. They go into these houses to play. So at about 3:30 that day, a group of neighborhood boys, about, between the ages of 9 to 11, they enter one of these abandoned buildings, and they're looking for actually some scrap wood to build a fort with. And they find little Martin dead on the 2nd story. So they leave, an ambulance is called, and unfortunately they're not able to resuscitate him. So Martin's body didn't show any like real visible signs of struggle, but what they did find, and what was not reported to the general public, but remember this for later, they find an empty pill bottle of aspirin on the ground near him. And so one of the assumptions made was that he had found this bottle and eaten the pills like candy. Again, this was not reported to the general public. So despite that knowledge that there was this empty bottle of drugs next to him, the coroner's report listed the death as natural causes and that he had just simply died while playing. That's what the death report listed, which doesn't make a goddamn bit of sense.
Yeah, but think about, like, underserved neighborhoods. Like, if kids die, they don't really give a shit. They're just one less mouth to feed, so.
And one other thing that they failed to report, but that they did later end up mentioning, is that he had slobber and blood coming from his mouth. So, like, clearly something had happened here that wasn't he just, like, healed over. It was just very strange, and, like, none of this made it into the initial reporting. None of this made it to the coroner's office. It was just listed as natural causes. Again, though, like, in this neighborhood, and we see this even nowadays in low-income areas, things are just not reported correctly, and things just get swept under the rug because, like, who cares about the poor people, right? And that's kind of what's happening here. So...
Well, I mean, we do, but...
Well, yeah.
The government doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, the very next day after Martin was found, Mary was celebrating her 11th birthday at Norma's house. But Mary, she can't even have one fucking good normal day at this point, and she, at one point during her birthday celebration, was in a different room, and Norma's dad walked in on Mary strangling Norma's little sister. He quickly separates the girls, and shockingly, like, didn't think much of it.
He's like, kids will be kids.
Yeah, he's just like, oh yeah, they're just playing, like, a roughhousing game, even though she's strangling his daughter. So the parents in this story, like, 0 out of 10 on all fronts. Like, none of them are good.
None of them have their shit together.
Yep. So the next day, so this is day 3 of Mary's fucking crime spree. So the next day on the 27th, a daycare center is broken into and vandalized. And so amongst the mess, just general mess that they left behind, they left a bunch of notes, 4 in particular that are of note. One reads, "We did murder Martin Brown. Fuck off, you bastard." Another says, "I murder so that I may come back." The next one says, "Fuck off. We murder. Watch out, Fanny and F word. Bundle of sticks word." The last one was really rambly and nonsensical, but it also made mention of murdering Martin. But it just, like, didn't make any logical sense, and to read it, just, like, who... Doesn't make sense. So, over the next few weeks, Mary would go over to Martin's house frequently to ask his mother how she was feeling, and her line of questions was just, like, really bizarre, even for an 11-year-old. So she would ask, like, are you crying over him? Do you miss him? Can I see Martin in his coffin? And she would ask all of this while, like, giggling and smiling like a little fucking psychopath. And so Martin's mom would just, like, kind of close the door on her and be like, what the fuck? And just, like, brush her off and be like, leave. Like, get away from here, you freaking psycho. So, yeah, that was very strange. And, you know... all of these things, I think hindsight for investigators and the people involved in this case are like, oh yeah, that's like a big red flag. But at the time they were just like, it's just like a weird neighborhood kid.
Yeah.
So 9 weeks later, after Martin's death, a 3-year-old named Brian Howie failed to return home for dinner. And his parents, they eventually tried calling for him, and instead, like, he doesn't come. So they went ahead and they, like, searched the neighborhood with no luck, and so they formed, like, a search party. Finally, the parents are fucking showing up and doing something. So soon there's, like, dozens of neighborhood people that have joined them in their search for the little boy. And amongst those helping search were Mary and Norma, who allegedly looked way too happy to be looking for a missing boy. They were smiling and skipping and giggling and, like, laughing the entire time they were searching. And eventually, around 11 p.m., Brian's body was found by police at an overgrown demolition site. Again, keep in mind, there were these just, like, everywhere in this neighborhood. His body had been covered with weeds. And this time, it was immediately clear to police that he was the victim of a homicide. He had bruising around his neck and body and scratches all over his little face. And the post-mortem investigation concluded that he had been strangled to death between 3:30 and 4:30 the day he went missing. He also had the letter M carved into his stomach. And somehow they were able to tell that the M had actually once been the letter N. But sometime after he died, someone had come back and then added the last line to make sure that it read an M instead of an N. So they could also tell that the attacker had likely been a child, because had it been an adult, a lot more force would have been used to strangle him. Like, his windpipe would have been crushed, whereas this one, like, it was little hands, like, just barely enough pressure to actually get the job done was used. So the police, they do end up launching an investigation where they would end up interviewing 1,200 children, including Mary and Norma. And they end up visiting these two multiple times because they were basically just fucking shady as all get out. And they would answer the questions, like, smiling, again, like little freaking psychopaths. Their story would just constantly be changing. And just, like, they looked really happy to be interviewed for murder. So Mary, she's 11, so she starts to slip up, and when she began giving different details and versions of her story, people got real suspicious of her. In one interview, she mentioned that she had seen an 8-year-old boy playing with Brian, and that he had hit him for no reason. And she also mentioned that the older boy had a pair of silver scissors with a broken handle, and that he had once tried to cut off the tail of a cat with those scissors. Just, like, weird random details like that. However, this detail was immediately suspicious because details of the case that were not made public was that there was a pair of scissors that were found near Brian's body with the handle damaged in that way. So this is something either the killer would have only known about, or that boy did have a pair of scissors like that and it was just known to people. Now, thankfully, upon looking into the story, the boy that she tried to blame had actually been with his family at the airport, so he had, like, a rock-solid alibi. He just was not even in town that day. So all of this is adding up to there only being 2 suspects remaining, and they were, of course, Mary and Norma, because their accounts of that day just kept changing. They could not get it together. They're children. Like, why are we surprised? So on August 4th, Norma ends up being interviewed for a 4th time, and in this interview, she ends up saying that yes, she had been playing with Mary that day and that Brian was murdered that afternoon, and Mary had taken her to go see Brian's dead body. She had also shown her the marks on his stomach and then hidden a razor blade under a block of cement, and that Mary told Norma that she couldn't tell anybody. So the detective is like, well, can you show me where the razor is? And so they go down to the site where Brian's body had been found, and once you fucking know it, just as Norma had described, a razor blade was found, and Norma was taken down to the station to make her official statement.
But can you imagine being these cops and you're just like, there's a tiny child murderer just roaming around, and, like, I'm assuming probably, like, in a lot of our, like, impoverished neighborhoods, like, there is a ton of children because they don't have any access to, like, birth control or anything, and also it's like a lot of these people are sex workers, so I'm sure there's just, like, a higher amount of children. So you just have, like, some random little sociopath running around with, like, a fucking knife.
Yeah.
Like Chucky.
I know, like, Mary. So at this point, you know, as we said, Norma's been taken down to the station to make her statement. And the police are like, we gotta take this fucking bitch in. So they go down to Mary's, they collect her, bring her to the station for additional questioning. And Mary's sitting there the whole time. She's, like, acting annoyed and agitated. And the entire time, she's sitting there asking for a lawyer. And, like, that makes sense, because this is an 11-year-old that has been raised by criminals. She knows her fucking rights. Right. She's like, I want a lawyer. However, upon being told that Norma had ratted her out and shown where the razor was, Mary immediately threatens to kill Norma as soon as she gets out of there. And so, basically, however, like, despite them being like, this girl's a fucking nuts, they didn't have concrete evidence on Mary. And for all I know, Norma's statement was just like, she was pinning it on Mary, so they had to let Mary go. And so a few days later, the detective in charge of the case ends up attending Brian's funeral, the one that they had just recently found. So he's there because he's like, well, I feel like, you know, that old trope with the murderer or like always returns to the scene of the crime or like comes to these things. So he goes there to suss people out and see if anyone's looking awful, like suspicious or whatever. And it was at the funeral that he like absolutely knew with no uncertainty that Mary was guilty. And he goes, in his notes, he wrote, as they carry the coffin from the family's home, Mary stood there laughing and rubbing her hands together. And he thought to myself, my God, I've got to bring her in or she'll do another one. Just like Mr. Burns, like, rubbing her hands together like an absolute freaking psycho. So,
oh my God.
That afternoon, he's like, I'm done fucking around right now. So he makes the executive decision to arrest both Mary and Norma Bell. Fun fact, both of their last names were Bell, but they were not related. It was just like a weird coincidence. Anyways, during Mary's questioning, she tries, obviously, to pin the whole thing on Norma. The detective also brought up that the break-in at the nursery and the death of Martin Brown again, because he's like, something's weird. I feel like these are all related. So Mary kind of cops to it and is like, yeah, I am aware of these things, and that was all Norma's idea. And said that Norma was the brains of the operation, basically. And so at this point, both girls are taken into custody, and the evidence against them begins to pile up. So, for starters, when they're investigating the girls, they went out and they collected the notebooks from the girls' school, like their personal notebooks, to verify their handwriting versus what was found at the daycare break-in. And it did match, so they could determine that the notes from the break-in, it looked like one girl had written a couple words, the next had written a couple, so on and so forth. So they also found in Mary's notebook some cryptic stories that she had written about Martin's death that included details that only someone that was involved would known. She also drew a picture of Martin's body lying next to an empty bottle of aspirin. So it's becoming pretty clear that Mary has a lot more information on these cases than, you know, she's alluding to. They also were able to find gray fibers that matched the dresses of both Mary and Norma, both on or in the vicinity of where both bodies had been found. So this leads to the girls being charged not just for Brian's murder, but they were also able to pin them for Martin as well. And so their trial finally begins in December of 1968. And while most people are immediately convinced of Mary's guilt because her actions are just that of a crazy person, many people had a hard time believing that Norma had as much of a part in it. Again, she was labeled as simple, and she was definitely like the type that was a follower. So people just didn't buy that she was the brains of the operation.
Yeah, like she just didn't have the capacity to make her own decisions like that, and she didn't really understand what was going on.
Right.
She was...
Well, and another thing to note, too, is that in the trial, Mary just, like, no emotion at all. Like, she did not show any sign of remorse or anything like that, whereas Norma, like, upon being questioned, she was, like, crying, like, seemed like she felt badly for what had happened. And unfortunately for Mary, of course, her mom doesn't help the situation either, because she would cause, like, loud public outbursts in the courtroom during the trial, whereas Norma's family had a much more sympathetic appearance, and Norma, like we said, she showed a much more demure, like, she seemed sympathetic, and she had a very, like, childlike, for her age, much younger understanding of the crimes,
Yeah.
and she would also, like, just appear very nervous, where Mary just fucking sat there like a little psycho.
Like, she probably didn't understand the gravity of it. She
Right.
was just like, oh, they, like, were asleep when we left.
Yeah, like, it was very clear that Norma didn't understand really the consequences of her actions until her, like, consequences showed up. And she was like, oh shit, like, I didn't realize that this was what we were doing.
Right.
So, at the end of the trial, Norma ended up being acquitted because the court didn't believe that she understood fully what Mary was making her do. And public opinion is that Norma, although she was taken to and shown the bodies after being murdered, it was more of a situation where she just didn't say anything to the adults involved than actually, like, having a hand in the murder, So while she might have, like, seen the body and known where things were, she didn't really actually, like, do the action of the murder.
Yeah.
So she was
Or, like,
acquitted.
watched Mary do it and was just like, are we gonna go get lollipops?
Yeah, she's like, oh, yeah, we can go get, go down to the corner store and get some candy after this, once you finish up this casual murder that you're doing.
Real casual.
Yeah, so
Real cash.
thankfully, I think, I don't know. I feel like maybe Norma should have gotten, like, a little bit of time in juvie. I don't know if that was a thing back then, but she was mostly acquitted for everything. And Mary was sentenced to murder. She was, sentenced for the murder of yada yada. So her sentence was to be detained indefinitely on murder and manslaughter charges, and she was sent to a reform school while she was still young, because obviously you can't send an 11, 12-year-old into the jail system. And despite their rough relationship, Mary's mom did come to visit her often. However, every time, despite Mary acting happy to see her upon her visit, like, it would prompt her to have really violent outbursts after her mom left. And so Mary's mom, Betty, also sold her story to the tabloids and went off to make, like, a pretty hefty profit off the situation. So just like a shitbag, honestly. Mary, she was actually able to profit off of this too, and was offered £50,000 for the exclusive rights to her story. And she always blamed her mom for how she had turned out. So upon basically aging out of the system that she was in, she was sent to another institution when she was a bit older, I think like 17, 18, where it was basically like a situation where she had to live at this facility, but she was allowed to, like, go out and get a job. She was allowed to leave the facility, basically. And she is released from prison entirely from any sort of, like, incarceration in 1980, and was granted anonymity by the government.
Anonymity?
Yes, thank you. So in 1980, she's granted that by the government, and she goes on to have a daughter. And so this anonymity was granted to her daughter, and eventually her granddaughter. So all in, she ends up only serving 12 years for the murder of 2 young boys. Apparently, it's said that she was completely reformed upon release, or not informed, reformed upon release. So I don't know the exact details, if she was maybe, like, given heavy therapy when she was in there. I think it's easier to reform a criminal when they go in so young and they're not in the American prison system, to, offer them therapy and, like, a chance to better themselves. But also, she was granted anonymity, so who knows, she could have gone on to, like, be a fucking shitty mom, and we don't know. After 1980, it just, like, no one knows what happened to her.
I think, like, part of it, though, was, like, the situation that she grew up in, because it was so violent, like, such bad things were happening, and, like, she really just didn't have any day of, like, normalcy or peace until she did go into the prison system. Like, I would say that she probably could, like, be reformed just because, like, she might not have been born a killer, it was just, like, the circumstances that made her like that, but then once she realized that that's not how she wanted to be, she was like, okay, well, I'll be a mom and grandma.
Yeah, I think it probably helped that she was so, like, it's fucking terrible what she did, but she went into jail so young, and then being in jail was the only stable environment she ever had. She had stable adults in charge of her. She had, like, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She had access to therapy, I'm assuming. I would hope
Clothes and toys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think jail was a great place for her. Juvie was where she needed to be, and I hope that she eventually felt some remorse for what she did, and that she did come out fully reformed. That's what I can hope for. But also, I feel real bad for the families of the boys involved here, because that is very sad. But yeah, that's
well, it's hard because you feel bad for Mary too, because, like, she didn't deserve that any more than they did. Yeah. So
I truly don't think that she, despite, like, being kind of, like, creepy and nuts and, like, not seeming remorseful, I think that she just didn't understand that what she did was bad because of what her mom did to her, because of what her dad did for a living, and the surrounding, just, like, no adults in her life ever, like, showed up for her the way they should have, or, like, any of the kids in that neighborhood for that matter. And so she didn't know. She just didn't realize that what she was doing was so fucking horrible, and hopefully therapy changed that.
Yeah. All right, well, are we ready to...
Tarot time.
So, for tarot time, we have the Queen of Wands. So this is like sort of creative energy. This is like fire energy, like Leo, whatever. But she's vibrant, she's out there, she's creative, she's passionate about her stuff. So she's what's happening now. She's ready to go. She's ready to this is the Knight of Pentacles. This guy, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be a guy. It could be a lady too. It could be the Queen of Wands, but it's like hardworking. This is like your hard work is getting you to a point where you can like have some vulnerability. This is a Strength card reverse. Like you don't have to just be like tough as nails, hard bitch. You can just be vulnerable with people and like be open and be okay with things being out there, because it's going to lead to some great collaborations with the Three of Cups upright. So you're going to have some great collaborations, some teamwork, some good stuff going on. So I think that's good enough for today.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Positive. Not bad.
No, not at all.
So
yeah.
Tarot time for this week.
Woo-hoo.
Be vulnerable, be open to just putting yourself out there.
Snaps for that. All right, so weekly
Fuck
FUs.
The Mormons.
Yeah,
all of them.
Utah TikTok moms for being just messy.
But also, that's a fuck yeah, because we love messy, like, stuff that doesn't involve us in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. That I can just, like, sit back and, like, watch the collateral damage without having it, like, affect me in any personal way whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
That is nice. I really don't have any other FUs. I've had a pretty good week this week.
I've had a pretty good week, too. I'm trying to think. I say fuck yeah for all the, like, stuff that's in the works that's happening.
Yeah.
Which is keeping us busy and away from you guys, but we think you'll understand.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff's happening. Stuff's moving.
Yeah.
So.
We're just, no FUs this week because it's a good week. We have positive energy. We had a good tarot reading. So I think that it's...
Good vibes.
Let's keep the good vibes, man. We're rolling into summer right now. We're
getting lots of sunlight and or exercise.
Arguably too much for a ginger. I'm burnt to shit right now on my back. But that's...
Oh, yeah.
It felt good to be a lizard for a day and just, like, get crispy.
Yeah, I've got, like, a huge... Just, like, one strip right here. Nowhere else.
It's funny. You can tell where I tried to put sunscreen on my back because there's, like, definite finger marks where my hand landed and then just red all around it. Like, I did not even try to rub it in.
That's why I just do the aerosol because I'm just like...
The next day when I went back outside, that's what I did. I stood in my shower and just, like, full body, like, aerosol spray can of sunscreen. So.
Under the clothes and then put the clothes on and then on top of the clothes.
Yep.
And, like, yeah,
fully.
no, I get it.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Well, guys, that was a good positive note to end on, aside from the sunburn. But you know what? The sunburn means it's summer, so I'm going to be okay with that. So,
yeah.
Peace out, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, non-binary Scouts. We love you. We will see you next time. As always, I will recommend you follow us on Instagram because we will typically post before we release an episode, especially right now when we're kind of, like, inconsistent with posting. So, yeah, follow us there, and you'll stay up to date. You'll see us reposting little Bubby Child memes on our story. We'll just shitpost every now and again. It's a good time.
Pictures of cats.
Yeah. It's a great time to be existing.
A ginger.
Great time, yeah. It's a
great time to be ginger.
A great and terrible time to be a ginger. Oh, they came and picked up their garbage can.
Oh.
Good for them. They found it. Alrighty, guys. We will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Bye.